Member for Fyzabad.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to join in this debate on the 2019-2020 Appropriation Bill. As I begin, I want to commend the contribution by the Leader of the Opposition, a brilliant response to the budget presentation by the Minister of Finance, and it really is a document. When we look at this document, the National Economic Transformation Master Plan 2020 to 2025 delivered masterfully and brings hope to Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I also wish to congratulate my other colleagues who have spoken on this side, who have spoken in the debate. Again, excellent presentations by the members for St. Augustine, Naparima, and Couva North. Madam Speaker, before I get into the meat of my contribution, I just want to address a few points by the member for San Fernando East. And Madam Speaker, the contribution by the member for San Fernando East seemed to have lacked any enthusiasm. The member didn't seem to believe. The member didn't seem to believe in what he was saying. And Madam Speaker, when I heard this plan, I felt more convinced that we have to commend the tourism plans that the Leader of the Opposition presented. Madam Speaker, I just wanted to comment, and
Standing order 53-1. E as in egg.
Thank you so much for the assistance, member of Orokuch East. But to all of us, I know it's late, but we are accustomed to this. We know we have a way to go. So if members will just compose themselves so we can hear the member for Fyzabad and support him in his contribution. Member for Fyzabad.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm sure my friend, the member for San Fernando East, takes it in the spirit in which I said that it's in the spirit of the House. But Madam Speaker, I just wanted to make a few comments on what the member said. And I take the issue of the daycare units. I think it's very important. But I just want to ensure that when these units are implemented, that we are very careful that we regulate and we supervise and we put proper support systems in place, because we see what can happen sometimes with some of these daycare units, and especially as we're looking to include children. We're looking after children. And I take note of the fact that we're speaking to single mothers, but I also wanted to mention to the government that they're also single fathers, and perhaps they could be included in this measure. It's just something that they may want to consider. The issue of data capture in the tourism industry and the fact that we are still behind in Trinidad and Tobago as compared to the other Caribbean nations raises some concerns, which hopefully the government is going to address, but it speaks to the issue of where we are in terms of information, communication technology, and our data capture systems. I was a little bit concerned when the member admitted that the increase in the cruise calls to Tobago and to Trinidad and Tobago was due to natural disasters in other destinations. I take your point, Minister, but I think it tells us that really and truly we have to increase our market and trust with regards to how we market tourism and attract on our own without the need for that kind of intervention. So we have not scandalized the marketing of tourism in Trinidad and Tobago, and I just want to mention, Madam Speaker, that is not the case. So, Madam Speaker, for your guidance and for those members of the public who are following this debate, my contribution today will be anchored upon the role of public administration in the delivery of goods and services to citizens via the funds approved when this appropriation bill is passed. And Madam Speaker, I intend to use examples from various sectors in my presentation to illustrate the challenges that our country faces in implementing and executing projects, and to demonstrate this government's failure to deal with some of the issues The Ministry of Public Administration has a pivotal role in ensuring that governments deliver on their promises, whether it is building schools, community centers, or pavilions, delivering timely and quality health care, improving public buildings, or providing social support to needy citizens. As a reminder, Madam Speaker, when we speak of the public sector, we include civil servants, teachers, and members of the protective services. I will focus mainly on the civil service, since it is an important cadre of workers and they play a very pivotal role in implementing government's policies and plans via the various government ministries and agencies. Madam Speaker, a common complaint from the public is that the customer service is poor at government offices, with long waiting times and less than courteous treatment. And Madam Speaker, the member for Laventille West in his presentation earlier, towards the end of his presentation, did make an important point, and I took note, when he was asking the people of Trinidad and Tobago to get going on the business of productivity. And I think it's something that we need to address. It's something that we need to address in the public service and in terms of how we implement policies and plans. So, Madam Speaker, citizens complain that they still cannot submit their passport or driver's license applications online, and they would like to be able to pay a lot more of their bills online. Admittedly, while there has been some improvements over the years, many are frustrated by the snail's pace at which improvements are taking place. So, Madam Speaker, one can ask, is it a question of not enough bodies to do the work regarding the vacancies in the public sector? Or is it a question of the inefficient use of resources? Or is it a question of ineffective processes, Madam Speaker? So I take it from these three angles. Madam Speaker, I believe that these questions need to be confronted and answered in a more definitive way as we seek to approve over $50 billion in expenditure for the upcoming financial year. As I prepared for this, my fifth budget contribution in this Honorable House, I reflected upon the challenges faced on a daily basis by my fellow citizens in Trinidad and Tobago. I have no doubt in my mind that a large number of citizens are worse off today than they were just 4 years ago when the People's Partnership Limited office. Some will want you to believe that this is because of different economic circumstances, and whilst this may be a factor, it is also a fact that the country has gotten less for the over $200 billion spent to date by this administration. Madam Speaker, citizens come to my constituency office on a daily basis seeking help because they cannot feed their families. They cannot get basic drugs in the health centers and hospitals. They are asked when they seek medical care at the public health institutions to do blood tests, ultrasound scans, CT scans, and MRIs privately, and they have no money to do so. They are waiting forever for life-saving treatments such as coronary artery stenting and cardiac surgery. I'll come back and speak about that. They feel threatened by increasing crime in their communities. Their highly qualified children are unemployed or underemployed. They or their children have lost their jobs. Madam Speaker, the constituents of Fyzabad are amongst the hundreds of thousands of citizens in this country who are facing despair, disappointment, and disillusionment on a daily basis under this PNM administration. Madam Speaker, the question on my mind and on those of the thousands of citizens of which I speak is this: why are we in such a bad place, despite the fact that in the last 4 years, we in this Parliament have approved over $200 billion for use by this government? Has this money really improved the life of the ordinary man and woman on the street? And has the country gotten value for money? Madam Speaker, in case they may have forgotten, I want to remind this government that the money allocated in this Parliament is supposed to improve the lives of citizens, not make their lives worse. So the question really, is there any explanation for why we are where we are today? For the past 4 years, this government has been coming to this Parliament with many grand plans, seeking funding and getting the necessary approval. But yet they have been unable to translate their plans into outcomes that bring tangible benefits to citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. One can say that it appears that this administration seems hamstrung in the ability to execute, to implement, to deliver, to convert the budgetary allocation into goods and services for the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, let me give you an example from the health sector. I will start with that as an example first. Just Wednesday of this week, a colleague of mine who was working at the San Fernando General Hospital vented his frustration to me in a conversation, stating that 40 patients were waiting for more than 3 months for a simple procedure called a colposcopy. The member for St. Joseph will know what I'm speaking about. This is a simple procedure, Madam Speaker. When a woman does a pap smear and gets a suspicious result, it's a test that is required to confirm whether she needs to worry or not to worry. While she's waiting, of course, it creates a tremendous amount of anxiety. And the reason why the colposcopy for these 40 patients could not be done, and the waiting list had backed up for 3 months, was because the item that was missing, not the machine, not the doctor, but it was a simple item called a ball cautery electrode. It's a very simple item. It's not difficult to locate. It's not expensive. In fact, Madam Speaker, it might cost less than $10. And those responsible for curing this simple item for the doctors to use have been unable to do so for 3 months. Madam Speaker, whilst this is happening at the Southwest Regional Health Authority, the NCRHA is busy wasting money on color advertisements in the newspaper boasting about their pap smear drive. So in San Fernando, you have patients with an abnormal pap smear awaiting a procedure, and yet you have another regional health authority that is wasting money on color advertisements, telling the population that they're doing what they're supposed to do anyhow. So what an irony, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, I don't expect the Minister of Health to go and buy this item himself, and therefore I cannot blame him for this. What I expect him to do, however, is to appoint a competent board of directors who can oversee and ensure the effective management of the regional health authorities. Madam Speaker, healthcare delivery needs close oversight by boards and management and active collaboration with doctors and nurses and other healthcare workers to ensure timely, effective, and safe outcomes for patients. Madam Speaker, I am told that on Monday, the SWRHA will have at its head the 4th CEO in 4 years. So, Madam Speaker, how did the SWRHA arrive at this point? 4 CEOs in 4 years. First, they fired the incumbent for some frivolous reason. Secondly, they hire a senior manager to take a job that person never wanted. Very competent employee. Employee was there when I was chairman of the SWRHA. Very dedicated, competent, knows the business of the authority well, but was never interested in the position. So, surprise, surprise, that person did not stay long on the job. Madam Speaker, the third appointment is even more hilarious. A person with no particular expertise in running a major healthcare organization resigns as a director of the SWRHA board one day, and the next day, he takes up the job as CEO. Amazing. How amazing, Madam Speaker. And now, Madam Speaker, they have just completed another interview process that is expected to throw up the 4th CEO for the organization. He's a medical colleague of mine. I wish him well, but no. but Madam Speaker, I don't know if at this late hour how much he'll be able to do for the Southwest RHA. As I speak, and before I leave the SWRHA, Minister, I just wanted to ask whether you're aware that a newly employed manager in the SWRHA Human Resource Department has been asked to resign following an audit which revealed that the person submitted false qualifications. Amazing. So I asked whether the minister is aware of that and whether he might be able to shed some light on that. And that another manager occupying a senior position may face the same fate when the audit on that employee's qualification is completed. So, Madam Speaker, it comes as no surprise that the services provided by the SWRHA have deteriorated in such a short time. This SWRHA board, member for St. Joseph, is so busy hiring and firing CEOs that they have no time to focus on policy making and overseeing management. They're spending all their time in the interview room and none in the emergency room, Madam Speaker, where they can observe and learn so as to provide better leadership for their organization. This is a board, Madam Speaker, and the Minister is aware of this. This is a board that for the last 4 years has been trying to repair the roof over the labor ward in San Fernando, a contract which was awarded way back in 2015. So no wonder the organization is in turmoil, unable to carry out its mandate, taking healthcare back to the days of long waiting times and casualty, shortage of drugs and supplies and bed shortages. I will return to the disaster that is currently the accident in the emergency department at San Fernando General Hospital, Madam Speaker. But before I leave SWRHA, I just want to ask the Minister to tell the public whether chemotherapy services at the oncology unit in San Fernando are soon to be suspended, because this is information that has been hinted in a recent memo from the head of surgery to the medical director, and concerns have been expressed about that. And I raise that matter, Madam Speaker, simply because to say that the oncology unit at San Fernando was created and developed in 2012 by the former Minister of Health, my colleague, the member for San Juan Barataria, and this was really to avoid having patients from South and the Southern regions having to travel to St. James for chemotherapy. So, Minister, I urge you to intervene in this matter to ensure that these oncology patients in the South are not put at any disadvantage as compared to patients in other regions of the country. Madam Speaker, I use this scenario in the health sector to make the point that the wrong people at the helm can impact negatively on any good service that you are mandated to deliver. Madam Speaker, in preparation for this debate, I reviewed the budget contributions of 3 previous ministers of public administration under this regime. The member for San Fernando East was counting the number of ministers of tourism on our watch. I just want to point out to the member that they've actually had 5. It's difficult to know who is the minister at any point in time, but they've had 5. But so they are competing with the SWRHA, Madam Speaker, in terms of rotation of appointments. But be that as it may, I just want to say, I want to quote here what the member for La Joqueta Talparo had to say in his 2016 budget contribution, then Minister of Public Administration. And let me quote, and I quote from the Hansard. I wish to make reference to a billboard that was erected in my constituency of La Joqueta Talparo sometime in 2013 on the Freitas Boulevard in Phase 5, La Joqueta. This billboard has been advertising the construction of a pavilion on a recreation ground and is still standing today. You can see on this billboard that the project was started in May 2013 by the Rural Development Company under the Ministry of Local Government. Madam Speaker, I'm still quoting here. In 2013, the economic situation was far more favorable than it is now. Money was not then a problem. The project was scheduled to be completed in 4 phases by September 2013, as stated on the billboard. I'm still quoting. The Minister is saying, by the time I assumed the public administration and communications portfolio, some 3 years later in 2016, this project was still ongoing. Madam Speaker, we are now in October 2016. I am happy to report that the project should be completed in just over 3 weeks after the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government was able to marshal resources for its completion. At the time, the member for La Joqueta Talparo, then Public Administration Minister, went on to say, and I quote again, this project epitomizes everything that is wrong with public administration in Trinidad and Tobago. We struggle to get simple things done. The minister also went on to say, we cannot turn this country around unless we remove the inefficiencies that are so much a part of doing business in Trinidad and Tobago. So, Madam Speaker, after those pronouncements, I would have expected this administration to operate in a different manner based on the minister's pronouncements. So, Madam Speaker, I ask, how do we explain the following? Because we are saying here, we have an example of a minister who met a project, took 3 years to complete, agreed that it was wrong, and is saying that, that things should be done differently. So, Madam Speaker, how do we explain that the Siparia Union Presbyterian School, which was 52% completed in September 2015, is still unfinished today? Why is the Siparia East Secondary School, which was 48% completed, is still incomplete today, 4 years later? Ramai Trace, member for Urupuch East, is reminding me. Why is the Early Childhood Care and Education Center at Davie Avenue in Avocat not providing much-needed preschool education for our children, despite being, and I can't believe this, despite being 100% complete, while external work is 98% complete in 2015. So 100% complete, and this preschool remains covered by bush. Yeah, covered by bush. You know what is even more amazing, Madam Speaker? In the budget, the Minister of Finance comes out and boasts, and I quote him, "We have elevated early childhood care education." No wonder, Madam Speaker, that some of my constituents who live in the area and are eagerly awaiting the opening of this facility are now confused. The words of this government do not match their actions, Madam Speaker. These constituents have told me that they think this preschool is not being opened because of spite. I will not say that, Madam Speaker. I will not accuse this government of governance by spite. In fact, Madam Speaker, I will not accuse this government of governance at all. Madam Speaker, what is obvious and consistent about their attempts at governance is the inefficiency and ineffectiveness of their delivery mechanisms. How does it make sense, and how can it be value for the taxpayer's dollar to leave buildings that were 90% complete when you met them in 2015 and still not finish them? How does that make sense? How can that be value for money? I am certain that the Minister of Education will proffer some creative explanation to the suffering students and parents who may listen out of courtesy, but I assure him that they will not buy those empty promises. I can certainly understand, though, Madam Speaker, why they believe that they are being discriminated against, because there's no other reasonable explanation for this action. It just doesn't make sense to them. Madam Speaker, let me give another example of how process has fallen flat on its face in the education sector. And I speak of the students of the Fyzabad Anglican Secondary School. I know the member from Muruga Tablan is intimately involved in this project. And I'm saying this because I'm saying that governments are unable, to execute, to deal with it, to come up with solutions. This school has been affected by the demolition of a building, but the fact of the matter is that there are 2 vacant buildings that can be utilized for the students. Those buildings have not been used, and as a result of that, the Form 1 and Form 2 students are only able to attend school for 2 days a week, Madam Speaker. It affects the students. And I think that, governments have a responsibility to do whatever is necessary to ensure, that the problem is corrected. I understand, you will have your time, I'm sure, member. But I understand that the member did visit, he was in Fyzabad this week, member. He did not go to the Fyzabad Anglican School, but he went to the Avocat Vedic School, a primary school that both myself and my colleague, the member for Tabakit, attended. And it's a school that is really something that would have done very well. They had 9 students in the top 200. I believe that's the reason he would have gone. And I also want to take the opportunity to congratulate the parents, the students, the staff, and the principal on this achievement. And it's especially significant because this next month, this school is going to celebrate its 60th year of existence. Madam Speaker, as I move on, I will use another example of a project, this is a different sector, that is literally drowning in inertia and red tape. And I speak of the broken floodgates on the river at St. John's Trace. And I have to ask the question again, why are the floodgates at St. John's Trace yet to be repaired? is it a matter of implementation? Are we having an issue here? Because on numerous occasions in this parliament, the question has been raised. The minister has given the assurance that it is being dealt with. Contracts have been issued. But yet, as we approach the rainy season, the flood season, residents are very worried, and we cannot see any work being done. And again, I raise this example because it shows a disconnect between the allocation of funds in this parliament and the actual implementation of projects. Again, I don't expect the minister to do it himself, but one has to wonder who in the chain of implementation is dropping the ball. Madam Speaker, allow me to use another example of a project that is literally isolating a village. I speak of a landslide which occurred in Murray Trace, Siparia, in June of 2017, just over 2 years now, Madam Speaker. It's making the road impassable for hundreds of residents on a daily basis. The problem with this is that what has happened now is that these residents, instead of taking 10 minutes for an ill resident to reach the Siparia District Health Facility, it is now a 45-minute journey. Instead of taking 5 minutes for a fire tender from the Siparia Fire Station to reach the community, it now takes 30 minutes. I make these 2 points because your house catch fire, you're sick, you want to be able to access a health facility, or you want the fire tender to get to your house as quickly as possible. And because of this landslip, these journeys, these times, have now increased, to unacceptable levels. So, at a recent meeting with the residents of Murray Trace, they claim that the government is spiting them. I will not say that. I will not say that this is government by spite, Madam Speaker. I will not say that. But the question again remains that why is this not being fixed? I don't believe that the Minister of Local Government and Rural Development will spite Fyzabad. But I'm wondering now whether it is an issue of the ministry not receiving appropriate funds, or whether it is a lack of implementation, in that ministry. So, Madam Speaker, in my introduction, I mentioned the issues. I spoke about whether it is that we do not have enough bodies to do the work in the civil service, in the public service, because these are the implementing arms of government. So is it because of unfilled vacancies in the civil service? Well, Madam Speaker, let us see what this government has done to address this issue. So I want to refer to the member for San Fernando East, then Minister of Public Administration, in his budget contribution in September 2015. This is what the member for San Fernando East had to say then as Minister of Public Administration. And I quote, Mr. Deputy Stroke, Madam Speaker, based on the latest figures available to us, the incontrovertible fact is that at the end of December 2013, approximately 44% of the available positions in the public service were vacant. Of the 30,552 establishment positions, 46%, or 13,709 were vacant, and of the 14,194 contract positions, 41%, or 5,863 were vacant. The minister goes on to say, Madam Speaker, Mr. Deputy, Madam Speaker, what these figures demonstrate is that the public service has been operating on approximately half of its human resource capacity. Madam Speaker, the Honorable Member of San Fernando East, as the first Minister of Public Administration under this regime, correctly identified the staffing challenge of the public service. Madam Speaker, the Honorable Member went on to say, and I quote again, one of the critical objectives of the Ministry of Public Administration over the next few years, he's saying this in 2015, Minister, will be the improvement of the staffing situation in the public service. So this is what the member for San Fernando East promised us. So, Madam Speaker, the question is, where are we in 2019 with regards to vacancies in the public service? Well, if you allow me, Madam Speaker, to refer to a document which came to this House in response to a question from the Standing Finance Committee, the last Standing Finance Committee. And this is a response from the service commissions. And the question was, provide the current number of vacancies in the public service. And the response was that as of June 30th, 2018, the data collected revealed the following information. Number of established offices, 31,875. Number of vacant offices without bodies, 8,708. Number of vacant offices with bodies, 7,803. Total number of vacant offices, 16,511 out of 30,000. So we have remained, Madam Speaker, at about 50% vacancies. So we are not much better off in 2019 than we were in 2015. Additionally, Madam Speaker, allow me to refer to communication from the Personnel Department to this Parliament, again, out of questions arising in the Standing Finance Committee last year. And this response comes under the hand of the Chief Personnel Officer. And I quote, "The staff establishment of the Personnel Department comprises 186 positions, of which 111 are vacant." Let me repeat that, Madam Speaker. The staff establishment of the Personnel Department comprises 186 positions, of which 111 are vacant. So, Madam Speaker, the Personnel Department, a department that is instrumental in negotiating terms and conditions that will allow recruitment of additional staff, is itself understaffed. Madam Speaker, a frequent challenge encountered by ministries and agencies is late or untimely release of funds. It is one matter to appropriate funds here in this Parliament, but whether the Minister of Finance releases the funds and when he releases it is a different matter. As we know, the late release of funds can have an adverse impact on the implementation of goods and services, projects, and so on by ministries. So in this regard, Madam Speaker, I want to draw to the attention of this House the 18th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, Madam Speaker. And this report, which I'm sure, Madam Speaker, as chairman of the committee would be familiar with, looked at the release of funds for various ministries and agencies in 2018. And I just want to highlight a few points, and if you will allow me to quote from this report, Madam Speaker. And the first statistic here refers to the recurrent expenditure. And I look at page 13 of the report. And it's a pie chart. It's a pie chart. And what it shows, it looks at the figure from March up to March 2019. So I'm sure members will be familiar with the work and the purpose of the Public Administrations and Appropriations Committee. But for the benefit of the public, Madam Speaker, I just want to say that what this committee does, as opposed to the Public Accounts Committee, that this committee examines the current expenditure for the appropriated funds. So it really gives you a real-time picture of what is happening in terms of how the funds are appropriated. So the statistics here, looking at recurrent expenditure for up to March of 2019, and it shows that the provision released was 38%, and the provision remaining was 62%. So, Madam Speaker, at the middle of the year, you're getting the picture that the release is not as the ministries and agencies would like it to be. If we look at after 10 months, which would be the end of July 2019, again, we are seeing that the provision release is 67% after 10 months. So it means that 10 months into the financial year, you've only gotten 67%. These are just, the gross figures. And when one looks at the PSIP, with regards to, and this is broken up into the economic infrastructure and the social infrastructure. And again, the picture here is quite similar. After 6 months, 37% release. After 10 months, 47% release. And this is a bit worrisome because when you have the projects in these books that talks about the projects that you are going to do in the PSIP, in economic and social infrastructure, then it makes you wonder, how much really can be achieved when the release of funding is not forthcoming. And the figures for social infrastructure are very similar, 30% after 6 months and 33% after 10 months. But that's the overall picture. But Madam Speaker, I wanted to focus with respect to the personnel department, because we spoke about the vacancies, and therefore you want to look at whether the personnel department has been constrained by poor release of funds. And the allocation for 2019 was 41 million. I'm just giving an approximate figure, gross figure. The release at March of 2019 was only 13.2 million, and the release at July 2019 was 23.7 million. And the final release at the end of September 2019 was 30.4 million. So the personnel department ended up with 10 million short of the allocation. But more than that, it meant that for the first 6 months that they were very constrained. They were very cash-strapped. With respect to the Service Commission, again, it shows a similar picture of a 2019 allocation of 76.3 million. The release at March 2019, 37.7 million. At July, 60.6 million. So again, we are seeing a similar picture here, Madam Speaker. So the question really has to be asked is what impact this late release of funds would have had on the operations of these two critical agencies. And again, we come back to what is happening as to why these ministries and agencies are not able to implement government plans and projects in a timely manner. Madam Speaker, when you look at the release for the Ministry of Public Administration, it is even more frightening. If these figures are correct, as I'm sure they must be, Madam Speaker, because these were figures that were sent in response to the inquiry from the Parliament. And after 6 months, the Ministry of Public Administration, a release of 757.9 million, the allocation. After 6 months, the Ministry of Public Administration would have only received 95.9 million. A very, very frightening statistic. It means that for the first 6 months, this ministry would not have had the funding to do what it was supposed to do. The release at July 2019, the total release there would have gone up to 544.7 million. But again, you're seeing when that amount of money is released in such a short space of time, the question is whether it can be utilized unless it's to pay outstanding bills. So, Madam Speaker, when one reviews the PSIP document that accompanied this budget statement, the implementation gap in some sectors is even more glaring. And I just looked at the PSIP for 2019, and I just quote a few here just to give an idea. Under the PSIP for 2019, the court facilities allocation was 40.1 million. The actual expenditure was only 8.4 million. Public buildings allocation was 144.8 million. Actual expenditure was 29.4 million. So again, we see a big gap between allocation and actual release of funds. And of course, that is going to hamper the delivery of these goods and services. I took the opportunity to look at the PSIP for 2020. Again, I see under public buildings allocation 137.9 million. There was one item which caught my mind, and that item was the new forensic laboratory. And the question I ask is, how much will be spent on this new forensic lab in this financial year? Because I know it is something that remains important in the fight against crime. And you know, we've been hearing about a new forensic lab being built and so on. And the question is whether the government will release enough funding to deal with this. And I see an allocation of 40 million for medical equipment upgrade. And Madam Speaker, I just want to ask and throw out, and maybe the Minister of Health can answer this when he's responding. And I see an allocation here to deal with VR surgery dialysis. Minister, the VR surgery equipment, I'm not sure if you're aware, there was equipment that was left at Southwest RHA. That's excellent, I'm glad to hear that. And there's also, in the allocation, Minister, there's a mention of 2 cardiac cath labs, one at San Fernando Hospital and one in the Couva Hospital. I just wanted, for the population's benefit, to know whether the cath lab at San Fernando is still going to be constructed, because I see money has been allocated. Okay, so I take that as a yes. Because as you know, Minister, the issue of cardiac disease. Sorry.
Conversation
Thank you.
this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as you know, the issue of heart disease, cardiac disease is a big issue in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, the plans were there, Madam Speaker. So I just make these points, Madam Speaker. And I just wanted to, through you, Madam Speaker, for the Minister to clarify, because I see under special programs, treatment of adult cardiac disease, 2018, 19.9 million was spent. 2019, the same figure was spent, 19.9 million. But I see an allocation for 2020 of 30 million. And my question is really whether this additional, this increase of 10 million is so that additional patients will be treated for cardiac procedures, or whether it is just to pay off outstanding bill. And perhaps the Minister may want to answer that in his response. Yeah, sure. So, Madam Speaker, I mentioned that I would have gone through the contributions of the 3 previous ministers of public administration. And I just want to refer to the member for Port of Spain South as Minister of Public Administration when she spoke in this House last year. And the member spoke of the issue of public service modernization and the role of that ministry in the rollout of information communications technology for public service and individuals. And Madam Speaker, this issue of modernization of the public service has been with us for a long time. Both the issue of working conditions for public servants and the customer service delivered to citizens remain matters of concern. Madam Speaker, last year this House was informed of a new division in the Ministry of Public Administration called the Modernization and Service Improvement Division. However, when I examined the allocation for the Ministry of Public Administration in the books, I found the following, and I just flag it. Perhaps the government will want to respond, whether in fact I would have interpreted the information correctly. But I see that there is only one post in the establishment for this division, that is that of Director, Planning and Research, that there is no allocation under personal expenditure for any position in this division, and that the goods and services expenditure for this division in 2019 was 2.8 million, and in 2020, the allocation is 4 million. So we are speaking of public service, public sector modernization, and the question in my mind is whether those allocations are sufficient, whether there's enough staffing to modernize the public service. The issue of information communication technology also came up, and one of the things that I would have noticed, Madam Speaker, is that last year, with regards to ICT and the allocation to the national, the NICT, would be that although there was an allocation of 151.4 million, again, the revised estimate was 81.4 million. So, Madam Speaker, we know that information and communication technology is driving the world, and therefore, when you see that the expenditure in this area is lagging behind the allocation, you begin to wonder what is happening. And so, Madam Speaker, I wanted to refer to the Minister of Finance budget statement, and on page 7 of that statement, the Honorable Minister would have again mentioned the government's vision for the public service, and I just picked 2 of these items. And it speaks to reversing non-progressive values, attitudes, and behaviors such as low productivity and poor work ethos. And the other one is ensuring effective and efficient public service delivery and implementation of development interventions and measurements of results. And the question really in my mind, Madam Speaker, is that whether the allocation, whether the actions that are intended by these allocations in this budget is really going to achieve those goals, whether this is just pie in the sky. When one looks again at the Ministry of Public Administration allocation for 2020, for this financial year, initially it looked as if there was a big increase, because when we look at the expenditure for, and this is for the Ministry of Public Administration, when we look at the expenditure for 2018, there was 870 million, 2019, 757 million. Sorry, 2019, revised estimate.
Remember, your original speaking time is now spent. You're entitled to 10 more minutes to wind up. Please proceed.
So I was speaking of the allocation for Ministry of Public Administration, and I looked at the pattern for 2018, 2019, and then there's an estimate for 2020 of 1,192. So I thought maybe the allocation was increased, but when I examined the figures, and maybe again we look at this at Standing Finance, a big chunk of this really is for the UDICOT payments to deal with the outfitting of the government campus. So my question, Madam Speaker, is that, and again I quote from the budget statement when the Minister quoted Winston Churchill and said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And my question, Madam Speaker, is whether this government has wasted a good crisis by not doing enough to effect the modernization of the public service. And that is a question really that I ask, and that's a question that perhaps citizens will be asking. And we come back to some of the measures that could be done to modernize and improve efficiency and productivity. And we ask the question again about flexi time. We ask the question about hot desking. We ask about performance measurement. And of course, we've always spoken about how you measure performance in the public service. And I note that there is a new item on public sector performance management systems, $1 million allocation. It's a start of something. It seems to be a little bit late, but hopefully it will take us somewhere, Madam Speaker. So I'll just use the remaining few minutes just to speak about constituency matters, Madam Speaker. I was very disappointed this evening to hear the Honourable Minister of Public Utilities come into the Parliament, speak for 45 minutes, and not address anything about the water shortage and the water woes in the country, Madam Speaker. So another word on WASA, and I really want to make a plug because the commonest complaint that I get as a Member of Parliament in Fyzabad is residents and constituents call on a daily basis because they cannot get water. And I'm trusting that the Minister would make a sustained effort to fix the chronic water shortages in Trinidad. I heard in the budget document as well the National Tourism Plan being discussed, proposed by the Minister, and I just want to draw attention to the fact that Fyzabad lends itself to be an excellent tourist destination. It's the home of the labor movement. There's a historic mud house in the constituency. We have the South Oropouche wetlands, and therefore it is something that needs to be considered in terms of us going forward there. So, Madam Speaker, I don't expect that this budget will bring any measurable improvement to people's lives or sustainable development for communities. I could have predicted that a local government was coming, Madam Speaker, because there's a lot of frenzied activity and road paving and so on in the constituency of Fyzabad. We are grateful for that, Madam Speaker. But I just want, and box drains, and but I'll make you comfortable. It's one of the electoral districts held by the PNM members. So rest of these. So it's in your area. But, Madam Speaker, my concern is that in the rush and the frenzy to do these projects, sometimes they are not being done properly. And I raise that point simply because last week in a walkabout, the residents were complaining. They're happy to have the project, but they just want to make sure it's done properly in terms of the building of the drains and making sure the water flows in the right direction and so on. So, Madam Speaker, as I close, and I say this with the greatest of respect, Madam Speaker, I pointed earlier in my contribution to the issue of ineffective resources and inefficient utilization of resources. I want to point to one of the greatest tragedies that has ever befallen the citizens of this country. I said I would return to the issue of overcrowding at the San Fernando General Hospital. One of the reasons for this, Madam Speaker, there are many reasons, but one of the reasons is the fact that 400 beds are now out of the system because of the rebuilding of the central block at the Port of Spain Hospital. Minister will have a lot to say about that. And more patients from other regions are coming to the San Fernando Hospital. That's a fact, Madam Speaker. I know this for a fact because colleagues and so on tell me what is happening. No problem with that. The irony, though, is that these patients are driving past a brand new hospital at Couva with 230 brand new empty beds to come to San Fernando General Hospital to wait 2 and 3 days for a bed, Madam Speaker. I just make that point. So the question, I say this in the context of ineffective processes and inefficient utilization of resources. But, Madam Speaker, I say that the people of Trinidad and Tobago may have a different name for this tragedy when the true story is told. I thank you, Madam Speaker.